Los Angeles Film Festival is produced in conjunction with the presenting media sponsor, the Los Angeles Times, and host venue, the Regal Cinemas at LA Live, which includes this whole complex here at LA Live, including the Grammy. Thanks. I really want to thank the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences for their support of our master classes this year. You have a flyer with you with more information on our panelists today and the other classes we were able to offer this year. This is the last one of the series this year. You will be able to see what other classes we offered this year thanks to the support of the Academy. I also want to give a very special thanks to the curator of this program, costume designer Sophie Derakov. Where's Sophie? Sophie, back there, stand up. Her guidance has been invaluable for tonight's masterclass. She's been working on this, I think, since last year, because this is her brainchild. She started this costume design program, and this is the second year. Thanks to her and our panelists, we have some very interesting, seldom seen reference materials. So we ask that no photo or video be taken during this session. This is a special treat just for us here tonight. So take advantage of that. And now to our program. We are very happy to have one of the best costume designers of our time, Ariane Phillips, here to celebrate the contributions of costume designers in general to the world of cinema. She's joined by a director with whom she has collaborated on 5 films, James Mangold, and she got a nomination for an Oscar nomination for her work on Walk the Line. And our moderator will be the wonderful Elvis Mitchell. They didn't tell you? Oh, okay, no, you're wonderful. And you're a moderator, in case you didn't know. He's the curator of Film Independent at LACMA. Please help me welcome Elvis.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight. One of the things I happen to love about movies is costume, because when it's done really well, you don't really notice it, but you understand where these characters live in a very specific and crucial way. When you notice costumes, there's something wrong. Like if you notice my vintage Poochie shirt, for example, you know somebody's trying a little bit too hard. Thank you, Jim. What you've got to love about what Ariane does is she has a real understanding of people and the way they live in clothes and the way clothes are part of that environment, that psychological environment. So we will start with a clip reel of their work together, and then we'll bring them both up. Please help me welcome to the stage a man who has directed 2 women to Oscars, Reese Witherspoon and Angelina Jolie in the movies we saw here. Director who got a start in independent film, Mr. James Mangold.
Where am I sitting?
And a woman whose work goes from Madonna as a stage performer to Madonna as a director to Tom Ford to James Mangold. Please help me welcome to the stage Ariane Phillips. Now, one of the things I was saying when we started, Ariane, in the introduction, is that it's important that the clothes not be ostentatious, isn't it? That they be about the way the people live rather than being show-offy.
Well, I think it's important. It's all about tone, I think, and it's every film has its own kind of needs. For me, God forbid a costume should take someone out of the experience. So, it's about creating the character and helping set a tone or an emotion underscoring kind of the work the actor's doing. I also think costumes are like a capsule, kind of that beam the actor into that space, so that there's also a visceral quality that I think is really important as a designer for the actor to feel, whether it's the scratchy wool from, 3:10 to Yuma that, was in Christian's costume, or, the soft cashmere sweater that Tom Cruise, every fabric informs how we feel and how we walk. So I think that there's an interior job I have to do as well in the costumes for the actors to kind of use them as a kind of beam me up, Scotty.
Well, what are we looking at here on stage, and how did you choose the pieces that we saw? What do we have up here?
These are just, at the far left, that is Tom Cruise's costume from Night and Day, and then Cameron Diaz's bridesmaid dress and her bag that she wore for a good part of the movie. And then this is pieces of Christian Bale's costume from 3:10 to Yuma. And then over here, Reese Witherspoon's dress from Walk the Line, and a couple pieces from Winona Ryder and Girl Interrupted.
Jim, tell me about your first conversation with Ariane, how you guys met and started to work out the scheme for Girl Interrupted.
I met her for Girl, and I think I was really, she came highly recommended from a bunch of people who had worked with her on Larry Flint, and from one of the executives. And when Kathy Conrad and I met with her, we both were really impressed with her, with the book she had made for the movie, but also just the kind of, for me, it's so much with collaborators, it's never so much about the original ideas necessarily that someone arrives with, but just kind of who they are and what they're going to bring. It's true for me in terms of every collaborator, including actors. I don't expect anyone to have it nailed when they interview. In fact, if they do, that's kind of weird. So that for me, it's more important that I feel like this is the person who I'll find it with, as opposed to the person who already has it. And that's very strongly the feeling I had when I met her.
Did you feel like you didn't have it nailed when you met him?
Well, so much of the world is a journey. Like when you're prepping a movie, there's discoveries along the way. So all I had to go on was a script. And having never met Jim before, but knowing his work, I think I appealed on that level. And just, it's kind of like, it's a my job is a collaborator, so I never want to go in saying I'm an expert. I want to go in saying I want to have the conversation. And I think it's a like-minded sensibility when, you connect with someone and you feel like what you're saying is understood and vice versa.
Let me be clear about this too, because I think it's really important in terms of film keys and even director. It's just, you can't know it. You can't. It's not that the shit she had didn't look good. It's that she can't know it. No one can know it. Right. Meaning stuff's going to happen. Who's playing these roles? How are the locations going to affect it? How the time of year we're shooting going to affect it? How is that there's so much that what you're looking for is and I think it's really so often the snap to grid that people want to hear. Having done a lot of Q&As, everyone always wants to hear you knew it all in advance, because that means you're a genius, and that means you just had a wet rag on your head in the tub and you saw the movie, and then everything was just in your way for bringing your vision to the screen, which sometimes is a lie that filmmakers embrace because it's what people want to hear and makes them look really smart. But the reality is that you know some stuff and you're wrong about some stuff, but you have a compass, you have a sense of direction, but you don't know anything. And I'm always looking for people who share, in a sense, that it's not that they're wrong, it's that they're open. And that's all I'm talking about.
So I'm getting two things from this. One, I should stop taking baths. And two, that you're looking to hear somebody sometimes tell you, you should try this, and you want to be surprised.
Yeah, or I'm looking for someone going, I'm pulling this idea out of my ass right now, but what about this? And then they go, and even them going, you know what, that was stupid. How about this? I'm looking for what will be a dialogue in terms of making a movie, as opposed to a kind of rigid idea of and this goes for an actor who comes in having worked an audition to the point of it being really specific performance. I will always tell agents when they're bringing actors in, don't tell them anything. Like they'll go, can you give them any notes? I'm going, yeah, just learn the words and nothing else. Just learn the words and don't bring anything else but the words memorized. I'll spend a half hour with them, we'll figure the rest out together. Meaning that the same, it's just universally true for me. That why do I want the assumptions that someone made at 11:30 p.m. in their apartment with their boyfriend? Why do I want those in my, why do they want them? Like in terms of what we're looking for, they have no idea. And I don't know. So it's like, that's the universal thing for me that's.
That's the beauty of this job, too. I think as a filmmaker, it's like the journey that you get to go on with every story and the layers that you uncover and kind of which path you choose to take to tell that story. And, you know, the greatest thing is to work with a director who has, you know, who's open to the conversation, but has an idea of the direction, and then we find things along the way. And then the actor comes, and then the production designer, and it's just layers and layers of, you know, what creates the richness that you see on screen, hopefully.
Because as you're talking about this, one of the things, as I was saying when we started, that I like about your work is we know who these people are when we see them. And just that clip from Night and Day, for example, because I'm looking right at the dress, the bridesmaid dress with the combat boots. I mean, that feels like a kind of real life moment. It's like, to me, if you remember seeing an unmarried woman where you see Jill Clayburgh wearing a T-shirt, and that had never been seen in the movie before. And so women really, nobody puts on all that, well, I haven't met her yet, puts on all that kind of crazy movie stuff when they go to sleep. And I get a sense of reality from you as a costumer.
Well, also from Jim. I mean, Jim tells real stories, and, you know, I mean, that was in the script. Cameron's costumes were all, that character barely ever made, hardly ever saw her own aesthetic decisions. She was on the run, and she was wearing kind of, you know, that was her bridesmaid dress that, you know, she got pulled out of the bridal shop in, and then she was putting on something that they found at the dry cleaner. So it was like the costumes were almost not a reflection of her character, uniquely for that story. So, you know, and it was all about the kind of color, the ridiculousness of that yellow dress, which became something, but anyway.
But I even think about, I mean, and you just were saying it, I mean, she wonders how she turned up in that bikini. I mean, that's...
Well, that was a whole thing we had to figure out, right?
Well, that was to me, that whole part of the movie was actually the blackouts of that movie were my favorite part of that movie.
Yeah.
The kind of the ridiculous time, for those of you who've seen the movie, there's these ridiculous time shifts where Tom Cruise's character has a penchant for drugging her, and she wakes up in new places in new clothes, with all the attendant potential sexual trouble dealt with in the movie. But that to me was the most irreverent part of the script when I first read it, and I liked, which was that, and those changes were a big part of it. And I think the thing also, to just kind of bounce off of what you're saying about character, is that a lot of that, and a lot of, I think, the huge trust that I and a lot of other directors have in Ariane is just simply that you're not only handling, the costume designer is not only handling what they're wearing, and with all the aspects of that on screen, how it feels, that Ari was touching on before, but they're also handling the actor's first journey into the movie, meaning they're coming from another picture or time off, and they arrive, and the first meetings they're going to have, besides whoever's figuring out where they're going to live and whatever else, is just going to be these kind of first visits to the wardrobe department to see what's there, what it feels like. And so in so many ways, the wardrobe team is the introduction to the actor of the ethos, personality, vision of your movie. And is an advanced team, if you will, for me, in terms of the process of the actor. And I think I've seen movies where someone who's less confident and more clutchy in those early meetings can start things off from the very get-go on a wrong note that spreads throughout the entire production like wildfire, meaning that it is an incredibly pivotal role in terms of leading also the journey of the actor from a kind of sense of safety and exploration and a sense of optimism about what she's saying about the people who are coming up after her and how they're going to be dealing with that actor. And I think she's exceptionally gifted had, I mean, I've actually never had kind of issues like that with her around. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, do you like the talking to actors part? Is that something that feels good to you, feels comfortable?
Oh gosh, it's never really comfortable. I think like
You fake it. You fake it.
yeah, actors. Every actor has their own process, right? So some actors are method actors, or people are reactionary. They're coming off a bad experience, on a film before, or a good experience. So you really never know what you're getting, and their job is, I often feel it's delicate hands and it's a sensitivity because while like that first meeting, while you want, you're their first kind of introduction to the world and it's often an opportunity for them to get information. They want information like where, what's happening and what is our house, what is the
Where
set
the
look
script
like?
page is.
Yeah, where what's going on with the script and, so you that's a delicate road to navigate because you don't want to usurp or give any information that might, it's like a little bit like walking on eggshells. You just kind of have to feel it out. It's kind of like dogs sniffing each other, I think. And you want to keep them invested and interested, but you don't want to cut off, the director's.
Which appendage?
So I don't know. It's in the best case scenario, it's like incredibly exciting time. It's where like all these, all the research and the prep and the drawings or the collages and all the conversations we have kind of become real. Like, first time I meet someone, often it depends if they're going to work the next day or, in a week or in 3 weeks or like with Joaquin and Reese, I had access to them, I guess, a month before we were shooting. So the costume can be at any stage. It can be from taking their measurements to throwing the whole costume on them if they're working the next day, depending like if an actor is coming in from, somewhere else and that's just the way it is schedule-wise. So it's like, but I think we've worked together really closely when it's come to like, for instance, like Russell Crowe on 3:10 to Yuma, he was working on location in New York. We were in California about to go to New Mexico, and I made a presentation that I worked on with Jim and also with the producer, with Kathy Conrad, and we were on page with that research that I sent him because he wanted to see research of the time period. So we were very thoughtful about what part of that world we were going to show him because that would be part of his vernacular. He was doing, I think, American Gangster, so he was in a whole nother world. And then he could digest that, this kind of, we FedExed him this research book. And in that, I talked, I laid out the groundwork for what I, gave him options of ways to go with the character. And that started the communication. But that was really, other than maybe your initial conversations with him, that was the first time he saw the world. So being very cognizant and on page, and that's one thing I just love working with Jim on is that, we can riff together and have his protection with the actors. He's a very actor-oriented director, and we know how to, I'm not an island. Often costume departments feel like an island, like they're not, like all departments. And, the great thing is that there's a lot of communication and we approach this together. So, if that makes sense.
No, it does, because as you're talking about this, one of the things I find myself wondering about, because something that happens very often in your movies, Jim, there's one character who tends to be quite vivid, be it Reese Witherspoon in Walk the Line, or Angelina Jolie in Girl Interrupted, or Ben Foster in 3:10 to Yuma. And for you, the idea of, because these are also these characters who are kind of in their ways catalysts for the transformation in the story. And your costuming of these people has been really interesting. If you could talk about that a little bit.
He's looking at you.
Well, Ben Foster I'll talk about, because Ben Foster's costume,
By the way, as I tell you, my favorite jacket in movie history.
It's interesting. After 17 years, thank you. After 17 years of working with Madonna, and who is such a huge impact, as we know, in popular culture and fashion and trends and all that stuff, I've never gotten more interest from the public, from strangers, and friends, and from everyone about that costume, that white leather cutaway jacket, which was actually inspired by a piece I had seen at, of all places, the Roy Walters Museum here.
Really?
Yeah, it was an archival piece that I had seen, and it was really intriguing to me. And actually, initially, I thought it might be a great thing, a great place to start with Russell Crowe's character, because his character had so much bravado, and he was just such a badass. Ben Wade was just a badass, you know, but a white leather jacket wasn't something that Russell Crowe wanted to entertain.
Oh, you had the conversation.
I put it out there. He made it very clear from the beginning he wanted to wear black, which initially was disappointing for me because I felt like it was a cliche. But I was like, okay, well, then I met Ben Foster, who was just so, our first fitting, he was just so game and so interested in the world. And he has this really amazing kind of honey coloring and these piercing blue eyes. And he really, it just kind of made sense. So I kind of made it more for his character.
You know, and the interesting thing about that journey she's talking about with Russell is that, and I think this is an illustration of the thing we're each talking about in our own way, is that I think he was right. Meaning, I think it was better the way he steered things than what if Ari necessarily or I could give you another instance, had gotten our way. Meaning, that is the dialogue that's really interesting. Like, it occurred to me as I was making the movie that that it was really a buddy picture. And the guy you're calling the villain, like in terms of Russell, is not really. I mean, he only kills people you can't stand. And it's Ben who is the real antagonist of the movie, hunting them mercilessly after them, who ultimately offs the hero of the film and kind of is. I mean, it is his pressure. By any dramatic standard, that he is the antagonist of the film. The other two are holed up in a hotel or riding together, learning about each other, learning about their differences, all of that. But that in many ways, it might have been for the right or wrong reasons, but I actually think Russell's instinct to kind of make himself not as exciting as Ben was make a safer, more kind of staple choice. Wasn't necessarily, I think, and his body type never would have serviced that thing. I mean, he's so barrel-chested, it never would have looked the way Ben looked in that either. I mean, but it's just, to me, that's not an illustration of someone not getting what they originally wanted, but of just shit happens, and it's actually, and that's part of it. I mean, Russell's not good just because, he's not a good actor just because he's lucky, he's smart. And even when someone doesn't know why, sometimes they're drawn to something. Anyway, that is the give and take I'm talking about. That
flexibility.
Yeah,
So
and
true.
Ben would never be wearing that if he had loved the white leather. And then we might have had a panic about him, how Russell, and then the white leather might have been booted because he might have gotten a set, never felt comfortable in it, and then it never would have been in the picture. So it's like these things are all a never-ending kind of spinning wheel of creative variables. Yeah.
And it's true is that it's like for me in the fitting room, things really become clear, and sometimes you kind of have to throw out all that research and all those preconceptions about the character when you are face to face with the actor in your rack of clothes. I've had situations where I guess that's one of them where you had a preconception about what the character should be, and then you meet the actor and you realize that you have to be sensitive to kind of what the actor brings to it. So things change. But in terms of your question about the vividness, I mean, I think it starts on page, really. Thankfully, every single one of the films I've worked with Jim on have been, it's been on page. It's been really smart. It's been written a certain way. And then, with Walk the Line, with June Carter, there's so many things that I learned about her. That I didn't know, like her sophistication about how she dressed and how she, in the Carter, Jim actually, started me on this path that I really investigated. In the Carter family, she traveled all over the world, and at one point she wanted to be an actress and lived in New York, and she read Vogue magazine, and she bought expensive clothes and could afford them. And so she had an aesthetic, and she, it was really about, that story for me was just about the arc and the kind of onstage personas and the offstage personas of who they were. So I think Reese did an incredible job, embodying June and bringing us into her world. And the actors that you speak about, Angie, Ben Foster, Angelina Jolie, Ben Foster, and Reese Witherspoon, these were parts that they really were transformative for them, I think.
But he's right also that they were, and you're right, in the script, it was written that they had to have an impact on others. They actually had to be stars within their microcosms.
But that's something you do a lot.
And that actually, when you were telling a story about Russell and the coat, was something you very much introduced me to on Yuma, which was this, you came to me with these visuals I had never seen before, which was this kind of, this whole rock star that outlaws, once photography was invented, were kind of preening themselves, almost in a kind of competitive sense, to be the best and baddest ass looking villain in their wanted posters. So that there was like this kind of, there was this, like album covers, there was this kind of quest to be the most, and there was almost kind of stuff borderline sexually ambiguous, borderline, looked like Prince, looked like all sorts of shit people were doing that was like with baubles and chains and
some of that stuff would have
crazy.
never even flown in the movie, the reality. Sometimes you see that research
and you're like, you can't believe it.
Yeah.
And but it did open me up to consider, especially in relation to Ben, where especially like the guy who's been second banana under, who's been kind of, number two for all these years, is just itching. He's trying fashion. He's trying, the Poochie shirts. He's trying whatever it is he can do to get, you know what I'm saying?
Elvis
I'm
is
afraid
wearing a
I do.
Gucci.
Yeah.
Do we want to look at any of the?
Yes. Let's take a look at, if we can. You guys talk over the Walk the Line clip that we have. I'd like to do that for you on mine.
Or do you have something in mind?
You
The
wanna-
camera test?
Yeah,
You
the
wanna
camera
see-
test,
okay.
yeah.
I should probably move to the
Yeah,
side.
we can move
right?
over a little
So
bit
these
over
Go
are
stand over here. We can bring
Yeah.
our mics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bring your mics, why don't you?
so these
don't fall
are
downstairs.
these
Just
are
stay- if you-
hair, makeup,
careful.
and costume tests that Jim got a hold of from Fox. And Jim, I don't know if you want to say we'll talk over them.
You guys-
Yeah. Well, these are just silent stuff we're shooting when we're about 4 or 5 days away from production, probably at this point. As you can see, it's not just Ariane, but it's everyone's set.
hair,
People are
makeup.
trying out drapes, how they relate to clothing, how the wall coloring, wallpapers, anything.
Now, that dress is the same dress that's on the mannequin. And actually, Jim can speak about it. We got a really serious note from the studio about this dress. Do you want to?
Well, it touched off a fear that their leading lady was going to look really what would you call it? Froofy period. Hee-haw, yeah, something, it set off in motion a series of anxieties, because one of the great fears, one of the great joys, I think, for someone like me or Ari making a period movie is exploring all this stuff. The studio, one of the great reasons not to make a movie is that it's period. So they're always having gigantic anxiety about, to the degree that the period choices are going to push back a modern audience.
Really, because they feel like it's sort of like axiomatic. The period movies really don't work a lot, so they're just nervous about them. Is that
I don't
part
think.
of it?
I think they'd argue that it's not a feeling. I think they'd argue that they have actual testing that shows that people like contemporary films and contemporary clothes more than period. People being the vast reams of stupidity that surround us every day, but
Well, I'll just go home now. I can take a hint. But no, because I just think this is really interesting to watch, to see all that you test these things in these rooms, to get a sense of how these characters, these people have the costumes. This is fascinating.
People have lost their jobs over wardrobe tests, let me tell you. Actors, I'm sure, have been recast, not in any movie I've done, but
No.
Crazy shit happens because the Oz, the people behind the curtain at the studio are being sent this, and then they don't have the you get their notes and their fears and, about, and then it's information gathering exercise for me and for my department, all the people that work with me, and we can see how, like here, how the stripes are working, and I don't even think I use that shirt, but they're, sometimes the costumes aren't ready, but we throw things on them just to see kind of if something strobes, how, what whites are like, how bright they're going to be, and the cinematographer's testing lighting as well. So there's a lot of things happening at the same time, hair and
And the
makeup.
actors exploring. I mean, you can watch like Joaquin right now. He's kind of in some kind of, trance. He's kind of figuring stuff out. And I'm exploring. I'm right by the operator. I'm doing these push-ins. I'm kind of trying to figure out how to shoot him. Am I low? If I shoot into the rafters, how much lens flare? What kind of kick? Do these period mics work? Da da da. All that stuff is happening right now. It's one of the most exciting moments in a movie.
It's funny too, because we can see here just from the way he stands in those shirts, the way he pulls his shoulders back, that thing you guys are talking about, how transformative all this stuff is.
Yeah.
Yeah, his physical, like when we did fittings, we used the guitar a lot, but his physicality into the character really progressed. And actually, this is like the very beginning. You can see watching the film. I mean, he's just at the beginning of harnessing that thing he goes into.
That weird, that tension. You can sort of
Yeah.
see that he becomes this other person on stage, and just seeing him with a guitar here, we can really see how that starts to happen for him. What changes did you guys make besides, I mean, just in terms of looking at these camera tests?
Well, we
how
ripped
does
the poofy shoulders off of June's
Yeah,
dress, right? I think it looks great.
The dress on the mannequin is sans the big confection on the shoulders. So we calmed it down, so to speak.
Because it's interesting because I guess what you guys are talking about is that because studios are always nervous about making a movie anyway, and you suddenly give them more reasons to be nervous if it's because it's period, they don't see it until they see it, if you know what I mean.
Here we're testing a pregnancy.
Yeah. They also, it's especially, if they have a young lady like Reese, who is a big draw and is well known and has a fan base, then the concern is, are we hiding her from the audience? Are we masking her so much that her value and what they're paying her for and why they're greenlighting the movie is getting undone, if you will, by the, it's like I could give you an example, and I don't know any better, but I could bet you right now that the people who made The Rover weren't happy when they see Robert Pattinson's wardrobe and makeup tests because he doesn't look anything like that guy in the movies that made $2 billion, right? So the scare for them is just much more like a banker's scare. Like, I paid him like I'm getting the guy from Twilight, but I'm looking at a guy who looks like he rolled out from under a car. So that's like, it's a very simple sense of, it's like a very simple sense of anxiety, that would be there.
Do we want to look at any of the others?
Yeah, I think, can we, why don't we take a look at The Girl Interrupted, we do that PowerPoint, because one of the things I also like about your work too, Ariane, and I was telling you this backstage, is outerwear. It's kind of, it's to be really sort of interestingly important to you. And
Well, I think when I don't, so these are fitting Polaroids back when we used to use Polaroid cameras. So this was like, so it's my first film with Jim, and this was 1998. 1998.
97, film came out in 97.
It came out in 97?
No.
No.
It's 98.
98? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, yeah.
And came out it was because we shot through the winter of 98, 99, I believe.
And I like actors to sit often in costumes so I can see how it works with their body. The upper left Polaroid, that was a costume we made for her, which is here on the mannequin in the front of the stage. Are there any more Polaroids? Oh gosh, that's Angie in her hospital gown.
Well, in terms of that's something I've often wondered because hospital gowns in movies often seem a lot sleeker than they do in real life.
That's Elizabeth Moss, Mad Men fame. And she was very young when we worked with her.
Yeah,
and
15,
very
14.
sweet.
Yeah, this was just before West Wing. So she's probably 16 or 17 years old there, yeah.
And you see the kind of wood, this that's the wood background. That was, we were, the costume department, we actually shot the film in Pennsylvania on a mental hospital, defunct mental hospital grounds that was part like drug
Well,
rehab.
they had
We
people-
did, there was a mental,
There were other wings where they
There
had
are other
people. Our
wings.
building was open. Our
so
building was open.
my room was right next, our little area was right next to where there was like real mental patients, and we were working on and we had barbed wire all inside our room, like around our cutting tables and everything. And this was like these flats that we threw up to try to have something that was a simple background. But it was method.
Because it looks like a
Method
mental hospital.
workspace.
It looks like a mental hospital that she's
Yeah,
in again.
it
So yeah,
was.
that does work. Yeah.
There was a real mental hospital.
But that panel, I mean, these flats you're throwing up too. I mean, yeah.
I wish I had made her look that skinny in the movie. That's incredible.
And she played an anorexic.
Well, yeah. Then it works perfectly.
That would be it.
That's Jared Leto.
Oh,
And
I've heard of him. I mean, because you're getting something interesting here. Casting working actors, or rather costuming working actors versus costuming movie stars. I mean, for the most part, these are people who are kind of on the rise still. I mean, Jared Leto was just on that TV show.
Except for Winona.
Except
yeah,
for Winona.
yeah.
They're all people who hadn't quite made a name for themselves.
It was very exciting.
Yeah, it must be. I mean, I wonder if it gets to be part of the fun. If you find they're a little more open to the experience, or they're a little more fearful. I'm sure it's a case by case thing, but
Yeah, everybody's different.
but in something like this, where it's about people showing their vulnerabilities, I mean, you end up talking.
Mary Kay Place,
Yes.
fantastic actress.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great vest or whatever that you'd call it.
Where did you
Actually,
find-
one thing I wanted to talk about, that this is when I go, whatever you would call that thing, is having worked with some other people, there's always this sense as a guy who's not like super clothes-omatic, high level of vocabulary about clothes.
It's a Poochie shirt, by the way.
Yes.
I thought you should know.
Yes, that you get that one technique a wardrobe department can use is to kind of intimidate you, which is to kind of use so much language and technicality that you kind of feel like you don't want. And Ariel's very gracious.
Jim, she can hear you. She's right here.
Yeah, but
so-
she doesn't do that. It's a very available technique of kind of making you feel like you don't know football and how it's played. So that either taking you aside and giving you a little education about what this is about or why we're exploring these foundations or or whatever it is. But sometimes a little education is really helpful and also really kind, because you can almost start to feel locked out because it's a world, as a guy, you might not know enough about.
It's a specific vernacular,
yeah.
for sure.
What's the vernacular about that dress? That
Well, I might have been talking about that paisley dress. I think is a linen, and I don't know. It just depends, whether you're talking about a fabric or like Jim said, like a foundation, like period underwear. I mean, most directors are white men who aren't white straight men who aren't necessarily versed in ladies' undergarments or period corsetry, or you know what you know. So it is a delicate conversation, and I think it is an education if you have a director that's open to having the conversation and to knowing what existed and kind of what the playing field is that we're working in. Because when we're doing these films, and that's Angelina.
and that's the code.
And her code. So every film is kind of, you have to be fiscally responsible. So you never really have budgets. I've never had budget where I can make everything or that I need to make everything. I'm a very practical designer, so there's usually a percentage of the costumes that you figure out that you need to make that are unique to the story, that don't exist, that you want to make from nothing. And then, like in a period movie like Girl Interrupted or Walk the Line, then, I really like to have the real thing that existed, the vintage clothes, because there's nothing like the quality of the fabric. So oftentimes I like to mix that and figure out kind of where to spend my money, so to speak, and whether I'm spending it on buying an amazing vintage piece or making a leather coat or whatever. I mean, there's many different ways that I go about finding the costumes or creating the costumes for each movie, and it just kind of reveals itself with. Oh, that's Angie in period sunglasses. I think that's from the set. There's probably my Polaroid out of focus.
No, are those period sunglasses, or are those?
Yeah, they
contemporary?
are. They are for sure.
But that coat, I mean, when you saw that coat, Jim, did you think, yeah, I see this?
I felt hugely relieved. I
Yeah.
felt like it was, I mean, the other thing that vintage pieces do, from my perspective, is they allow you to see what a lot of times when you're picking the wardrobe, it hasn't been distressed or aged. So because they can't start ruining things that you haven't even decided to buy yet. So one of the things that helps someone like me see where they're going to go is to get a piece that comes with the patina of actually being lived in, so you understand where all this other stuff will travel to meet it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But that jacket was also revelatory in terms of, the way, and it's the way Angie moved in it, the way she felt in it, the way she would ride it, just kind of, it just, like you said before, there's a vividness to her character, there's a kind of alpha-ness to her character in the movie where she just had to look badass and in a way that would make everyone else want to follow her, even if she was insane.
And these photos actually are just a study in silhouette. Like, none of these were meant to be costumes on the screen. This is an initial fitting, if I remember correctly, where I put a period coat on her, and on the bottom, actually, the top is different from the bottom. So the bottom, the ones on the top are just to see her body. I think that was probably an early fitting. And then the ones on the bottom are these leather pants that I had made for her. But that coat was just to see a silhouette, to see if it worked on her, and then we ended up loving it so much. So what happens is I do these fittings, and then I'll have a meeting with Jim and sometimes with the producer, Kathy Conrad, together, and we'll sit and we'll look at the rack of clothes, and we'll look at the photos, and then we'll talk about what has value for us and what makes sense. And then the next time I do a fitting, then it's a reduction, like I get rid of all the stuff that we agreed didn't work. And then I'll talk to the actor about Jim's notes on what he saw. So it's a process, and it's really great. Jim allows me to do these fittings where I can kind of groove with the actors one-on-one or with my team, because I'm not doing this by myself. I have a team of people. And then I can kind of bond with them because it's a trust thing, and then I'll go and show Jim, and then they'll want to know what Jim's response, what did they think? And I think equally, like if you're in rehearsals with them, because usually they're doing rehearsals at the same time, you might ask, or they might offer, how did the fitting go? What do you think?
This cool thing you got to see this cool thing we found, or blah 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 blah. I mean, that's all a great way, and when there's a lot of trust, it's one of the really nice parts about it is that you feel like in this introductory moment for an actor, particularly a new actor who I haven't perhaps worked with yet much, other than maybe an initial meeting or something. It's a nice introduction and a way to allow them a little space to get used to the movie, and at the same time, you have someone you trust who's kind of, because they will arrive. Undoubtedly, I arrive. Anyone arrives. All right, I'm in New Mexico. I'm living in a new house. I just had a fight with my girlfriend before I moved here. I got to try on these clothes. They haven't closed my deal. The rental they showed me sucks. Da 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 da. And it's like whatever it is, and then you're in a wardrobe session, and Ari and her folks become the first people that are going to be kind of like, where are you living? Is that a good neighborhood? Where are you buying your organic shit? Because I can't find any vegetables in this town. That is half of what's going on there. And
For sure. That's the distraction.
And once in a while in there, this new actor might say, is he a dick? I don't know. And Ari can go, no, ask him. He's nice, or whatever she might say. Maybe she goes, yes. But whatever it is, that's also a really important conversation to have in my absence, which is kind of this trusted person to kind of represent what these other people well and kind of say, to help them a lot. There's so much less, to me, actors come in the stripe of stars and non-stars than wounded or not wounded, open or not open. And that has nothing to do with stardom. I have met far more supporting players and day players that walk into a wardrobe and a movie with way bigger chips on their shoulders than Tom Cruise or Russell Crowe or anyone else I could name. That kind of attitude is more a function of terror and lack of confidence than the otherwise. The movie stars will generally know no one's going to make me wear any shit I ultimately don't like, so I'll go on this journey. And then after 3 or 4 days, I can tell her I still don't like it, and then she'll go, okay. So there's not this kind of clenched feeling about the process. And so very often it's nice for someone to allow that person to almost realize no one's going to force anything on them. Like that there's a moment for them to react to the fact that whatever their experience on some other show was, you're going to be okay. No one's saying, you know, but because some people will arrive, like having had a bad experience, pre-girded.
It's a lot of pressure to walk into,
Yeah.
like, you know, especially if they haven't had time to do their work, or they don't know how to interpret the character, or they're insecure, whatever, all that stuff. It's a lot of pressure to walk in the room, and all of a sudden someone's done the work for them. So I was just trying.
Is that not a good thing though? Because I think as an actor, if I come in and the costume and designer has figured this out and worked on this, that would give me a sense of relief. Oh my God, there's one less thing for me to do.
Absolutely, I've had that experience. I mean, it wasn't a film with Jim, but early on in my career, I did this movie Tank Girl, and Malcolm McDowell was in
Which
it.
I happen to, with a very young future movie star in it. The second
Naomi
one.
Watts.
Yeah, absolutely,
Naomi
with a brunette, as a brunette.
Yeah.
I love that movie, by the way.
Oh, well, it's
From the
a cult
Jamie
classic.
Howlett comic.
Sorry?
From the Jamie Howlett
Yes,
comic.
yeah, Jamie Hewlett, yeah. Well, Malcolm McDowell is the bad guy in that movie, and I was super nervous about, because he was such a big part of my childhood experience in terms of movies like Oh Lucky Man and Clockwork Orange, and my parents kind of dragged me to all these art house films, and I was kind
Your
of,
parents took you to see Oh Lucky Man?
oh yeah, I know. You wouldn't even believe the films my parents used to see me. But yeah, no, so I knew, I was a big fan of his. Aunt Caligula, you name it. Malcolm McDowell.
We're calling Child Protective Services right now, retroactively. We're going to fix this for you.
Well, it was like, the double bills that were, back in the day, the art house double bills, and they, I had young parents who exposed me and my sister to a lot of stuff, which I think it worked out okay. But Malcolm
This
McDowell
explains
was
all
part
Madonna
of it.
costume now I get the whole thing with her.
I know. There's a backstory. But Malcolm McDowell, he was busy on something else, and he had like one day that he could see us, and then we weren't going to see him until the day he worked, which was a month later. And this was very early in my film career. And he came in, and I was very nervous, and I over-prepared. And, I didn't know what to expect, except for someone I was extremely intimidated by, and he came in and I talked him through everything. All the costumes had been made, so it wasn't really a rack to choose from. He just this is what you're wearing. And he was very quiet, and he put the clothes on, and, I was sweating bullets, and I wasn't very versed on how to manage actors at that point. And he turned to me when I handed him the boots, and he just started, he said, "Thank you so much. You have really helped me. I haven't had any time to think about this character. I didn't know anything about this character, and this makes it so easy on me." And I gave him the boots, and he started telling me something, some crazy anecdote from Clockwork Orange, and I think I fainted. But, it was like, that stuck with me. So I take that responsibility, I take that very seriously. This might be an actor's only way in, or a start. So not only do I want to help them and open the door for them, I also don't want to make it the end-all be-all. So that was its own experience, but usually, and I think there might be a couple people here who I work with, because I've invited a couple people, and they can attest that I usually distract an actor as much as possible in a fitting.
How so?
I just try and make them comfortable and ask them questions. Where are you staying, or where, what do you, or if it's here, well, I never work on movies here in town, but usually it's like, how just distracting them with things to make them feel comfortable, so that they don't have to focus on. Everybody knows how horrible it is to put clothes on and look at yourself in the mirror. I mean, it's not a pleasant experience. I don't know very many people that like that experience. So there's a mirror, there's someone putting pins and sticking them and, measuring them and all these awkward, uncomfortable things that make you feel self-conscious. So to try and distract them and make them comfortable. And then you get through that, that's like an icebreaker, and then you can sit down and have the conversation. I usually have research that I show and share with them and try and keep everything open-ended. Do we want to look at any of the 3:10 to Yuma or Night and Day stuff?
I was just going to say, because you're talking about people being self-conscious, that's the beginning of Night and Day with Cameron and the mirror in the plane being self-conscious. I mean, and that sort of starts with that whole kind of journey for her being in these costumes that emphasize how self-conscious she is. And it's also two things I wanted to talk to you guys about. Can we put the Night and Day clips, Night and Day? The idea of doing,
to the side.
yeah, it's a contemporary film, and it's also a
Is
film
it
with movie stars.
I think we're just, from Night and Day, we're just going to show some, what was it, you guys? Maria, what were we showing from Night and Day? It was maybe so this is like, initially, I had the concept, of this American hero, and I really did a lot of research about Steve McQueen, and Tom really liked that. This was from my initial research and a photo from him in the movie that was inspired by Steve McQueen.
Are those Steve McQueen personals he's wearing too? Or?
Yes, actually, they are.
It's so sad that I know this. But
The Barracuda jacket, the
Yeah.
famous Barracuda jacket. And so it's kind of our archetype, our talisman for his character.
But the idea too of for you both of you guys to talk about this a little bit, the idea of coming up with the costumes for icons, for movie stars to wear.
Like this, yeah.
Yeah, and using another icon.
Well,
as
I
a-
feel, that part to me was just so, Tom Cruise in that role is just the Americana. And I was just looking at all these kind of American icons and, Tom is, so this is some of the research I had shown him and then kind of how it ended up in the fitting or on the film.
I mean, the movie is really
translated.
kind of a fantasy too. So there's a level where I think our journey is less about making what this character would wear as much as this interfacing with kind of spy iconography and kind of glamour and all that stuff was a part of the journey for all of us. I mean, it wasn't like we were just trying to make it. Oh, are you at the end of the?
Yeah, let's say 310 to you, and let's do that before we get audience questions. But I just quickly to sort of touch on Night and Day a little bit. I just thought it was really interesting the way you costume them both in sort of ways that deal with the fact that they're movie stars by making the costumes kind of part of what we're doing. I mean, it's a sort of it's being a little sort of showing your hand a little bit in ways that you generally don't. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's your observation. It's interesting.
Well, here's Russell in not the white leather jacket.
No, exactly. I believe is that a fitting photo? I'm not sure. Yeah, it was a fitting photo.
Is that when he arrived, or is that earlier at the hotel?
That's Christian in a fitting photo. That's Christian being funny with a hat on because 310 to Yuma was all about hats, which Jim can talk about because they really are hard to light an actor, and that was a joke.
Yeah, it's a little big on him, the hat, isn't it?
I believe my hat expert, I needed an education on hat. It's an incredible costumer and supervisor, Tangi Crawford, who I think is here today, who did 310 to Yuma with us and also walked the line. And Tangi really guided me and informed me and armed me with all kinds of knowledge around the world of hats. I was like, I never fucking want to do another hat after 310 to Yuma because everyone has a hat. But this was a joke. That was good. That's at our camera test, actually. That's Ben Foster at our camera test before
Where
his
were we?
costume
Where are
was
we?
aged.
Where is that?
Was that on this? It's Peter Fonda at fitting, and Peter could never keep his. He just had to make funny faces all the time. He must not like fittings. Alan?
Yeah,
Alan, I can't remember his last name.
Tudyk.
Luke Wilson. So that's in process. That's a fitting, and so this was interesting.
Period prosthetic or
So Christian Bale's character had a stump of a leg. It had been amputated. So we had to figure out like what the prosthetic would be, and we worked with a really great man. And we did the research about what existed, and we made these options for Christian. We said, well, we can make this is before it's been aged. This is what it is. We looked at the research, and then we created this contraption that weighed like, I don't know, 50 pounds. It was so heavy. And then we said, well, we can also make it this way, which was like light featherweight, like they make like fake rocks in movies. It's just super light. And Christian really wanted the real thing. He wanted it to be heavy because it would inform his physicality. He didn't wear it all the time. And we didn't even end up showing it, did we, in the end?
We do. We show it. It's a night
show.
scene.
Yeah.
You see it. It's
you
just,
definitely see it.
You don't get it's the kind of thing where you'd end up disappointed because it's in shadow. It's all that work, and then it's kind of, but you do see it. And then there's a later scene where he gets shot in the foot in the gunfight, and you see that obviously there's no toes.
There's a lot of energy around that foot contraption.
Yeah,
this
there
is a
was.
fancy pants sketch that I did not do. That was a presentation sketch that I had when I sent this initial research to Russell Crowe. I do draw. I just am not a great artist. I wouldn't really share it with anyone. So I hired this amazing illustrator, Lois D'Armand, to make my scribbles beautiful so that, sketches are hard for actors to see themselves drawn. I mean, usually I like to not draw their faces. I don't know. I just think it's kind of awkward looking. And I don't really like sketches, actually. This was 3:10 to Yuma sketches that Carlos Rosario, who's my assistant designer for the first half of the movie, did, which it's not really showing.
Visible.
And those are fabric swatches. So this is a board of my sketch, the aged fabric swatch. I guess that's Christian's costume. Is there another one? Yeah, Dan Evans. Yeah, they were done in pencil without faces, just so that people wouldn't get.
Is there another one we can read a little bit better than that? Another sketch that's not a pencil sketch, Maria? Do we see it?
Yeah, that's.
There we go. That's better.
So that's the aged leather and the pant fabric and the trim and stuff. And
You can do this.
this was kind of just done, almost put together later, just so that we could track all the stuff we were making. We had a big shop, and we made most of the costumes.
I was going to say, was that part of the fun of this movie for you, that you got to make things instead of having to sort of source them and sift through things? Is making costumes fun for you?
No, I don't have to make things, I find that it's a real ego thing. A lot of costume designers really feel it's not a costume unless they've drawn it and had it made. And I disagree, like for me. Like we talked about earlier, I like the mix. I like, in a period piece, I like the mix of what really existed. But there's just costumes don't exist from the 1800s. We can't get them. So we did have to make them. And this film for me was every film kind of has a theme for me and of what is my learning curve. And this was about aging and distressing. And I really was excited to embark on this journey with my crew because it was all about the manipulation of fabric and the fact that these guys, kind of go. They're weathered. The costumes are weathered, and how to put that kind of character into the costumes.
Let's,
I think there's some photos,
yeah,
maybe.
I was going to say, you have some pictures in there we can see?
Maybe not.
No, I guess that's all we got. Because
Yeah.
we can, Jim, before we start taking the audience questions, go back to the stage. You were saying something really interesting before we started here, which is that it's not necessary for you that it be, strictly speaking, period as long as it's, or exact in terms of being the real thing as long as it's right for you, right? I mean, you talking about...
Like to use Walk the Line as an example, you can start, there's a level of research you can do where, and this isn't really only talking about wardrobe, so, because I think it's a kind of, there's a level of obsession that we all have to catch ourselves at. And it's not just the wardrobe department, but every department, which is the
signs.
signage, microphones, recordings, dates, of anything where you're suddenly going, well, this might be this would be the best dress on her for this scene, but I'm not going to consider it because it's a dress that wasn't manufactured until 1966, and this scene takes place in 1964 or 5. And that there's a point at which I think it's partly my job to go, that's crazy. Like, just go, if it's right, we should do it. Meaning that that's a level of accuracy that betrays what we're doing. You know, it's like we're not the Disney Hall of Presidents, and we're not the Grammy Museum. We're making an entertaining journey. That's not Johnny Cash, that's Joaquin Phoenix, and that's not June Carter, that's Reese Witherspoon. And so there's always going to be something that's not real because he's 8 inches shorter and she's not, and it's like there's 100 ways once you enter that obsessiveness. Plus, being a writer, like, I'm like listening to someone say to me in a meeting, well, we can't use that dress because I'm like, I just threw that fucking year down on the script. Like, I could have been, like, there's a level where you have no reverence for it because you go, like, I'm just guessing anyway. I mean, like, the fact or I shifted it, you know, it's like I'm twisting fact all over the place to make a narrative. And so then you suddenly find yourself with all these department heads who are like, we can't do this because that would never happen. And you're like, you don't know how much bullshit is in there to begin with. Meaning that it's like there's just that level where we're here to tell a story and to pull someone into a journey in a world. And she's not an historian, in my opinion. That's a part of what she does, but she's actually here to paint a picture. And that would be
That's why I love Jim Mangold, because there is an OCD crazy reenactment mentality that can go on when you're doing a period movie, and we're serving the story. And also something we talked about a lot was designing for the contemporary eye. You know, when you approach a period, just because it existed doesn't mean it has value for what we're doing. And you have to remind yourself that constantly, especially like in 3:10 to Yuma, like, you know, there are things that will take the audience out of the movie. And I think that in any period that I've done, I've learned that from Jim, and I've taken that with me. And that's really helped because you can go to that OCD place, and I have to manage my team that way
Yes.
too. Like, I
Me
do
too.
want to know everything. Like, it's kind of like you have to learn ballet before you can do jazz. Like, I just want to know everything, and then I can figure out what doesn't have value for us.
The other kind of thing, and I'll say it a lot to other departments, not so much costume, is I say to myself, every movie is a science fiction film. In the sense that the world, you're making the world. The world doesn't exist, you're making the world. And so that, like for instance, the Yuma would strike you as kind of semi-historical, but it's kind of just a big wet dream of American history. It's not, the trains didn't arrive at the same moment that this with withdrawing, at the same moment that's the whole Western genre is a kind of fantasy based on an historical nexus that only existed for maybe 6 months. You know, that there's like, that the war ended and the trains arrived and the bank robbers are headed to Mexico and Carnegie's taking over and they're building the transcontinental. That didn't all happen in the same 6 months, but that doesn't matter. A really good fever dream of a movie takes those elements, just like, by the way, great samurai films, you take historical fact and you compress it and you make it into that's why we take 2 hours out of our lives to come see it, because it's not life, it's something more, And it does take a kind of evangelical effort. Not only with every department, and with actors as well, who will actually sometimes subvert their own performance in a way because of something they read, you know, and you're like, you're killing yourself.
Well, just watching you guys talk up here, I can see that you were probably immediately simpatico. You must have felt that almost right away when you talked to her, didn't you?
Yes.
5 movies, yes.
I guess that's the test. Well, I could talk men's fashion with you guys all day, to quote Die Hard, but I'm sure we have some questions here, so let's start right in the front. Yes, ma'am.
We're actually from New Mexico, so first I have to tell you, try the co-op and the farmers market, organic vegetables. Well,
We figured it out.
We figured it out. We've been there.
Looking at these dusty shoes over here on the 310 outfit reminds me of a few things we've worked on. And I wonder if you had any of those
Well, the opposite for
The
310. It was freezing. It was the coldest winter in 70 years when we were there. And New Mexico had like a
You probably remember the year that you got like 72 inches of snow or something. It was a nuts. What year was it?
unprecedented.
It was 2004?
Something like that.
It was, well, no, it was, I'd never seen
freezing.
a snow like it. We had to dig our sets out with bulldozers. I mean, there was just backhoes. I mean, we were
Yeah.
buried.
Yeah, when we came back from Christmas, we couldn't come back.
Our set was destroyed. But it was the largest snowfall it was on the radio. It wasn't anyone feeding it to us. It was just the largest snowfall in half a century.
I'll be honest, though, when it comes to an actor's comfort on set, I choose not to be on set that day. Because, no, really, like, not just to be funny, because the last thing I want to do is have an actor go to me and be like, I don't want to wear this today, I'm uncomfortable, and I don't want to have that conversation with them. It's already been decided, and even maybe part of continuity. So I rely on my team. I believe Lorraine Crossman Lorraine Crossman is here, and we met Lorraine
Is that
Crossman.
Lorraine weeping over there as she hears about this?
Lorraine is a brilliant set costumer who I met on Girl Interrupted, who was a local in Pennsylvania. And then she ended up relocating to California and worked on tons and tons of movies. But you also worked with us on Walk the Line, right? And 310 to Yuma. And Identity. So Lorraine has been on that journey. So I rely on people like Lorraine to keep the actors comfortable, which is an art. It's an art, not only like, and some actors like to be uncomfortable. Everyone's different. Sometimes it's part of their process to suffer.
On Yuma, there was a moment, I won't mention who, but I'll tell the heroes of the story, which is that
We won't tell anybody, I swear.
One
Let's
actor
stay in
went
this
up.
room.
One actor walked into Russell and Christian and said, "We need to establish a rule that we will not act under 13 degrees. That there's just we will not act. We will refuse to act." And they both, it's relayed by the makeup departments, told this actor to fuck off. But it's like it's hard. I mean, you try acting in 11 degrees at 7 in the morning. That's miserable.
Is that a casting offer for me? Yes. We have
You
one
wanna?
que- No.
Wanna try?
Yes.
Ariane, I wanted to ask you and congratulate you on having
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just I love it. What is it like to take that character through 20 years from Jade Street to the movie to Broadway?
Oh, for Hedwig.
Talk about the evolution. What was the evolution of that?
Sorry, Jim, you didn't direct
Do
that
it.
one. Hedwig and the Angry Inch is a movie, it started as an off-Broadway play in Jane Street in the late 90s, around the time we were doing Girl Interrupted. And I was asked to do the film version in 2000 with Killer Films and John Cameron Mitchell directing in high heels and makeup, and wigs and everything. And so I did that film. It was actually a very important film for me in my career because I quit a huge studio film that I was very unhappy on, that I kind of saw the writing on the wall, that production designer had been fired, and I kind of felt like I was probably going to be next. And I quit. I had a great agent at the time. I was very supportive. I quit to make no money, go to Canada, bring no crew, and do this movie with 2 people in my department that ended up setting me on my trajectory of what's important for me in terms of like criteria for working on a film. That particular studio film was something I had been talked into, and it was against my better interests, and sure enough, it was a miserable experience. So when I went so Hedwig was really, really important to me. So many years over the years, they've talked about bringing it to Broadway, and finally, Neil Patrick Harris was the right person. It was about the theater and the actor, and so I did my first Broadway musical with it, and it was really, really incredible experience to be reunited 14 years later, to revisit the material in a totally different way with deconstructed, and to be reunited with some filmmakers who are very, very important to me and help me kind of keep my career on the right trajectory. So it's a special, special thing, and you guys should all go see Hedwig in New York.
Yeah, another question. Anybody else have one? Yes, sir.
I'm a DP, and I was wondering what your relationship is during the fitting with how you perceive the costume to be, presented on film. Like, there's going to be a certain lighting scheme
Well, it's important. I mean, usually I ask the director, you know, how is this, how are we using anamorphic? Are we using, you know, how is this, what kind of, what's the approach for filming? What's the look of the film? You know, some films have flashbacks and different stuff. And I try and, you know, there's certain colors that I stay away from personally that I find just don't translate well on
Which
film.
are those?
Green, I don't use a lot of green on actors. I actually don't use red unless it really means something. I used red a lot in Walk the Line on Reese because of the way it was shot, because I knew it was going to be warm. And, you know, a lot of times the lenses and the lighting is being developed simultaneously, and that's what you see in the camera test. And post-camera tests, I will throw out, you know, I test how things strobe or what whites are like, and I usually have a general conversation with the DP. We've done, I think, 3 of those films with Faden Papamichael, and Faden and I have he's pretty easy. You know, we have a simple dialogue, and, you know, the notes really happen in the camera test, I think.
Yeah. We have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
When you're making a movie, well, this is specific to Walk the Line, when you have the subjects of the movie already famous and well-known, how does that affect your costume choices? Are you picking iconic outfits that they might be known for, and where are you able to put your own spin on things to make it interesting for you, the viewer?
Celebrity gets in the way a lot of time. I think Jim is really great with casting in that, I mean, I think some of the best casting ever in films. I was particularly like, if any of you saw Copland, Sylvester Stallone in that role, and Copland was brilliant. I would be remiss to say that it doesn't inform the choices I'm making, which they did inform with Tom Cruise for sure. And that was a big one, you know, for me. I don't know, it's,
Well, it's like when you have Johnny Cash and June, who people know and love and stuff, you know, the black shirt and, you know, all
oh, you mean like in a biopic kind of thing?
not the actor.
Oh, the character.
The character.
Oh, sorry.
Well, the funny thing about that is that, though, that there's so much that isn't known. I mean, he didn't wear black all the time. And and on stage, he really didn't wear black much until the late 60s, when he kind of really branded himself that way. Much more earlier.
Looks like that TV show he did in the
He
late
had all
60s,
sorts
he
of
wasn't
shit
wearing
on,
black then either.
but also it's just the trickiest thing, and it's always important to me to kind of emphasize, is it's not just what they're wearing isn't what she's doing. It's what they're wearing, how they're wearing it, when in the script they're wearing it, how it feels on them, how it plays, it's like you could have famous people and you know you have to replicate an outfit, but you could take 7 costume designers and they'd have to replicate a look of JFK or Johnny Cash or anyone. You're still going to come up with 7 different movies with different looks, because it's not the idea that, you know, it's like you're always confined. Let's say I went off and made a science fiction movie, a real one, like that looks too much like Star Wars. No, that looks like Halo. No, that looks like, you're always confined. You're always reacting to all that other shit out there that you're trying to kind of react to.
We end up having those conversations, all that, not you and I, but everyone in film, always, every movie is a reaction to what, like, the last movie I did was like.
Oh, it's the biggest thing. I think everybody is always trying to compensate for whatever their last shitty experience was.
Yeah.
So it's like everyone, including me, you all come into the new movie going, the one thing I'm not going to do is that one mistake I did in the last movie. And sometimes the most dangerous thing is that's the thing that actually you should be doing on this picture and you shouldn't have done in the last one.
Yeah,
But,
Jim is very punk rock that way. Like, I think that sometimes, you know, he reminds me that maybe just what I shouldn't be doing is what I should be doing, like with the Russell Crowe situation. But in terms of Johnny and June, there was an arc that we knew we wanted to create, a beginning, a middle, and end. I usually try and approach each character that way of, what are we saying in the beginning of the movie, where do we want to be at the end of the movie? I try and choose films that I think there is a possibility for transformation. Those are the films that interest me. So this is this dress is June, you know, Carter family, June Carter. She ends up maturing from this place. That's when we meet her. So it's like we, and you know, we didn't have a lot of access or any access at all to personal photos. We just had professional photos from Walk the Line of like on stage or TV show and stuff like that, because everything was in probate, I guess, because Johnny
They had just died.
Had just died, and Jim had worked with, knew Johnny and June, so initially we always thought we would have access to those personal photos and what they wore kind of off stage and stuff. So, we just had to figure it out.
But the other, like for me, the one triumph, like on the look thing was, Reese was very set when we talked early. I don't know if this was before you had kind of gotten on full time, but she wanted to wear a wig. She wanted to like wear a wig. She wanted, and I don't know why, I was hell bent not to let her wear a wig. And it became this thing, like just became me versus Reese on this wig thing. And it was just like, she's like, honey, I'm from Nashville, they all wear wigs. And I was like, no, not her. She doesn't wear a wig. That's what's different about her. But it was like, I didn't know whether she wore a wig. I just knew I didn't want to make a fucking movie with Reese Witherspoon in a wig. And
well, we've all been taken out of so many movies
because
by
I've
wigs.
seen, it's one of those, every time, oh, it won't look like a wig. It looks like a fucking wig. And I don't care if you get it made in that magic place in England where they cost 3 times more. It still looks like a wig. So it's like, and to me, the big thing was like Reese with brown hair is a revelation in the movie. I think she's just exquisite. But it was, and that was somehow, but I don't know what it had to do with anything historical accuracy or not. I just wanted to see Reese's hair brown. Obviously, June had brown hair, but her real hair brown. I wanted her to look real and natural. And I thought that was, and that had to do with something we talked a lot about, was I didn't want this to be like a nudies country movie, like the glittery. The whole thing John represented was a kind of abhorrence for a certain kind of Vegas style that country music had kind of veered into, when it was trying to compete with Sinatra and Bing. And there was a thing that happened to country music historically where they were trying to compete as a kind of cosmopolitan music, and they tarted themselves up and sequins and all that shit. But John never really went there, and he inched his way there. And I think that was really important that somehow, because I thought it would also push people out of the picture in a way that he was, and I think that was a lot of what Ari achieved, was trying to find that way to fulfill feeling like these were just real people on stage. And anyway.
And with that call to anarchy, let's thank Jason Engel and Ariane Phillips.
Thanks, Elvis.
Thank you.
Thank you.